again. This is Athena Jezik, and I just put some oil on her back, on Karina's back. And I'm going to just go through some techniques with the back again. You know, the back is very important to keep in good health as much as possible, because it's one of the pillars of the body, and there's organs that are inside of, on the other side of this vertebrae, and there's a lot of nerves that run out of the spine from the spinal cord, and it's running out to the organs. So when there's tight muscles, then that could crimp down a little bit, or if there's twists in the fascial structures, that can also clamp down a little bit on the nerves, which would restrict a little bit of the function, just because there's not a good electrical impulse going in to the organ, going to the organ. A lot of people come in with low back pain. They have a lot of pain in their lower back, and that's probably the most common thing that I see. And it does relate up into the shoulders, the position of the shoulders, the position of the upper back, and the position of the neck. And once those habits start to take over, they're kind of hard to change, because the brain has a muscle memory pattern that's working, so it will always hold in that direction. But the thing that's most concerning is if we don't keep our back flexible and movable, then the bones can fuse together. They don't always, but they can fuse when there's no movement between the joints. And that's one of the reasons it's important to be aware of keeping that back, the spine, in a movable and a little bit more mobile. The back will flex, and it'll extend, and it'll torque, and it'll side bend. So there's a lot of different directions that the spine does. And then there's muscles, of course, that attach to all of that. And when they attach to that, and there's restriction, then the muscle is going to start hurting, and that's when you get the back pain that goes into the muscles. Sometimes it'll spasm. But when people come in here with back issues, I always work the cranial work and make sure that the cranial system is in alignment and the cerebrospinal fluid is flowing well through the body. So I'm just working the muscles here, the trapezius, and going into the muscle maybe a little bit deeper than what I would do, because the muscle is inviting me in that way. And so all of this. Now, it doesn't seem like this would be something that can happen, but when people have discs that are out of joint, and the disc gets squeezed out or is pressing against the nerve, the subtle anatomy, the subtle work that can be done through the cranial work can actually correct that. If a person wants to have that happen, then it can happen, because there are some people that really don't want to get well. They just want to stay in their comfort zone, in their little safe zone. And they have reasons to stay sick, because it might be for attention or for money or for something. And you're not being honest with yourself in that. And money is more important than the integrity of yourself, which is understandable. But it has a certain path that it'll take, and you can't fake things for very long. without facing them if you want to really heal. A lot of healing also has to do, like, I'm thinking about the last person that I worked with the discs, a disc problem. It was a pretty serious disc problem. He came first to me and we worked a little while, and then he came back sometime later because he lived in a different state. And when he came back, I told him he just had to stay for enough days to be able to do an intensive kind of work on him. He ended up not needing the last 2 days that we had scheduled. But one of the processes that he did go through was he identified with what was holding him back by looking and understanding and having conversation, dialoguing in his sessions with what the low back relates to as far as in our physical life. And he faced that. He was one major issue. There's layers and layers and layers of that, but he did face that, and it brought him into where he was emoting. Emotionally, it really got to him. And that is the best place for a person who really wants to make dynamic changes, if it's done properly, with the dialoguing, because the dialoguing can keep one on track. The tendency is always to kind of go into the story of everything, but that you can do talk therapy about the story for forever, and it's not going to change anything. But when you actually get to a point where you can feel deeply that emotion, and you find that emotion, and you really feel it, and you really want it to change, and it's a moving kind of experience with that emotional body, that's when the real changes happen, because there's a lot of changes that happen in the brain. For instance, it's more plastic, more malleable, more in kind of in a little metaphoric way, but it does have changes that happen. It probably has changes chemically as well. And when that occurs, then the brain will actually change different patterning, because it's like discovering something, and it's a new way of looking at things, so there has to be a different neural pathway to be able to accommodate, that openness, that mind change. It's breaking a pattern, it's breaking a program or an indoctrination. So that's something else to realize. If you really are wanting to heal, that's part of the healing process. You can get the physical body to feel better and all of that, but you'll still have that kind of gnawing inside of you if there's emotional issues that aren't being addressed. Or if you're not willing to do the inner work, the shadow work, the deeper work. So if we want to start tying that into the more subtle anatomy, subtle frequencies, higher frequencies, if you can think about how that gnawing, because the physical body is feeling better, which is great, but the work isn't done, and that gnawing emotional stuff that is not identified yet, that's going to affect the rest of the frequencies that are more subtle than the emotional frequency. And when that happens, then that'll bring the chakras into a dysfunctional place. The meridians of the body, which are through the acupuncture system, they're going to be affected and can't do their job of what they do. The chakra system is going to be dysfunctional at whichever chakra is affected by that emotional problem, and you will see behavior in people to be a certain way. So there's a lot of signaling that can happen with a person whose body is in a dysfunctional frequency. There's a lot that you can pick up, those who have done their inner work, they can see it easier in others. And if you do see it easier in others and you're a body worker, it's better to not say anything, because the person that you're working on needs to find that sort of stuff themselves. When someone tells them what it is, there's all kinds of things that go on in the mind. It doesn't want to really accept it. It can stay in denial easier that way. But when a person is really put in a position to where they want to find out what it is and dig deep into that and find that particular, I call it an entity because it is controlling you to a degree, and find that entity in the body and remove that entity and fill it with something else that's positive and powerful, that's when the real changes happen. And I have really seen some very traumatized people change their lives 180 degrees once they discovered that, and they all thought the process was so easy, even though it was difficult to face. But all in all, they felt it was really easy because it happened relatively quickly. It was, 5, 6, maybe not even that many sessions, depending on what the level of trauma was and how much they had to work through. So that gives you another idea that, massage therapy is nice, it looks good and feels good and people like it and all of that, but there's so much more to all of this. And to be able to really understand that, and if you're called into being what I call a healing artist, if you're called to that, why it's important to get the basics down, why it's important to learn it properly, and why it's important to practice and grow with practice. Not pretend like you're got it already, but just whoever comes in, make that another practice, learn from the person on the table, and just go from there, because that's all you can do to help. And if you're not really qualified for that, then you're not really going to help the person. And by qualified, I don't mean taking a test and passing a test and paying money to get a little piece of paper that says blah, blah, blah. I'm not talking about that at all. It's about how much integrity the person has towards the work, how much they've worked on themselves to clear that, and if their heart is really genuinely wanting to help people to see them become empowered. All of that stuff is things that we're going to talk in great depth in the course that I have online. And I do urge any body worker, if you are really called into this work, to expand your skill level, because you can always integrate things that you already know. And if you start with the basics and look at the body differently than what you probably are looking at it now, you will really help the person 100-fold. So that's just kind of my ideas about that. I'm pretty strong in those ideas. I've thought about them for a long time. And I've gone through the work myself. I've done a lot of inner work. So just remember that there's a lot to this, and I hope that you get something out of this and begin to expand your experience and your mind and see a much bigger, brighter world. So with that, her back, I can tell she hasn't had massage for a while. So with that, I will say thank you so much for viewing. Thank you for listening to my rant, and I will see you in the next video. If you're interested in learning more about the subtle techniques and the energies that I've talked about in this video, please check the link below for my course. The Foundations of Subtle Alignment. This course is going to take you beyond the work of massage therapy. It will take you into the world of the subtle anatomy. Misalignment of the subtle structures is often the root cause of chronic pain, injuries, and chronically high levels of stress hormones. In this course, you will learn a protocol for assessing and aligning the subtle structures.